In this book, the Red Letter Challenge, and I actually have one more left. It's up there on the next to the lectern, so we have one more left. So if you need one, I got one more. Then we'll have to order more if we need to get more. But this week we've been doing, let's take a bit of a review. This week we're on forgiving for this week. But let's take a little bit of a review of what we did this past week. So celebrate a win that you had in the Red Letter Challenge over the past week. It was on being, and what ended up happening, I'll tell you what ended up happening for me was I think we did most of those things, but we did them out of order. So yesterday we had fun, even though fun was on, I don't know, it was on Friday, but we did it yesterday because we had fun with my cousins and my dad and my uncle at my uncle's place. And we took a day off on Friday instead of doing it the other way around. But so sometimes I guess you got to do that. You just got to switch things around a little bit depending on your schedule. How about some of the rest of you? Tell us a win that you had in the Red Letter Challenge this week. Nothing? Not even a little? Yay!
Didn't make the house. We were supposed to.
Oh no! Oh, that's too bad. That's it. Okay, nobody is saying anything, so we'll move on. How about a struggle? That's pretty much how Bible study works too. You kind of go, Okay, how about a struggle? Did anybody try any fasting? Did anybody try fasting at any time this week? Okay. Oh, Tom did. Okay. Oh, did you have a colonoscopy? Or something?
Wasn't my idea.
Yeah, it wasn't your idea. No, I shouldn't have said that.
It worked out right. I know.
Everything came out all right in the end, is that? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. No, he's not saying a thing. No.
I set him up there with an appointment.
Okay.
I know. It's a lovely game.
It is. You know, one of the things that Pastor Zach did not say about fasting, I guess I've always thought this was interesting. The Muslims have a month-long fast called Ramadan, and that's their month-long thing, and it's a fast. But it's not like they fast for 30 days, 24 hours a day. They fast during the daylight hours, and then when the sun sets, then they eat. Okay, and it's kind of an interesting way to do it. Now, as in every spiritual discipline, you can overdo it or do it wrong, and then and so sometimes they get criticized. Yeah, we fast all day and then we pig out when the sun goes down. Well, not Muslims, they don't pig out. They would beef out or chicken out or something. But, and I'm not saying that to be disrespectful or anything. They don't eat pork, But, and I don't think everybody does it, but I think there is some criticism that some of the maybe more well-to-do Muslims, put on a big spread at night, so that they can, they can stuff themselves because they fasted all day. But I think, I think that might be a thing to think about, is to say, so what if you fasted during the daylight hours and then ate? Why not? What would be, because it's in the daylight hours that we're really thinking about, what are we, because the point of fasting is to say, what are we thinking about instead of food, or instead of making a meal, or instead of shopping for food and that kind of stuff. So let's take the time that we would take to prepare the meal and eat and all that to do something else, like prayer or devotions or something. That's the point of fasting. So it might not be a bad idea to say, get up and have breakfast, and then don't eat anything the rest of the days. And then when the sun goes down, then we'll have something to eat. That might not be a bad thing. All right, any other struggles? We don't want to share our struggles any more than we want to share our successes, right? Just like Bible class, right, Pam? Okay. How about what did God reveal to you during the challenges this week? Did anybody do the challenges this week. Maybe that's the, yeah, okay. God reveal anything in particular to you? Even a little thing.
Well, if everybody just read the book, they did Game of the Word because he includes Bible verses
Mhm.
and everything. So everybody was successful if they did that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, everybody did in the Word at least every day if you read the little Bible passages, yep.
I like the little Ephraim and the Acts thing on the
Yeah.
I like that. That helps the.
Yeah. Yeah, we like that too. In fact, when we had the spiritual fellowship retreat a couple weeks ago, we went through the catechism and we separated into 6 groups, and each with the different parts of the catechism, and we just assigned groups and said, okay, that table over there. We gave them poster boards and newspapers and magazines. Said make a collage on the catechism, but make it in parts of what can we worship God for, what can we confess, what can we thank God for, and what can we pray about in terms of the 10 Commandments, in terms of the Lord's Prayer, in terms of the Lord's Supper, and so forth. And so actually that worked out pretty well. Those were the shenanigans we did. And they had a lot of fun doing it. So let's move on a little bit. Have you ever thought about how you could get someone back? Yeah. I was going to say, do you have brothers or sisters? It never works out. Well, that's what you learn as an adult. But usually you learn that through a mountain of experience in trying to get them back. Right.
But you still can pray for them.
You still can pray for them. And how do you pray for them? That the Lord would get them back. It's vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Okay, you go, boy. That often happens.
That's all you can do.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned.
Yes. What goes around comes around. Yeah. And actually, that's not a bad. And actually, in some respects, that's not a bad thing to do scripturally. If you read through the Psalms, what you end up doing is there are a number of Psalms and other places in the Bible. Some of the Psalms are like, Lord, here is what I want you to do to, this is my enemy over here. Here's what I want you to do to him. Knock his teeth out with a rock. Throw his babies off cliffs. All this kind of stuff. And then the psalmist or whoever is writing it will say, but I leave that to you, O Lord. And it's actually a pretty effective anger management technique, as it turns out. It's a spiritual thing, but it's also a pretty effective anger management technique to say, this is what I really want to happen to that guy, but I leave it in your hands, O Lord. So you get it out there, but then you actually do give it to the Lord. And if you do give it to the Lord and not go back and check and say, did you do what I asked? Are you following up on that, Lord? Can we check in on that? If you just leave it in his hands, then you're expressing your anger, but you're also releasing it, and that's the end of it. So it's actually not a bad anger management technique at all, and you're not dwelling on it. So I know you're chuckling over there, you're smiling like,
I never want to throw babies off.
Yeah, I know.
So I feel pretty good about myself.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Yeah, no, that's all right. But however it is, that's in the Psalms. So, have you ever imagined having the perfect comeback line? Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or while you're sleeping, you wake up.
Yeah. You go, man.
Tell the story of the child line stuff. But evidently this item was on my porch for 3 days before it found
Hmm.
the walker there.
Oh, gosh.
I wish I retaliated by finding it on his bumper bitch and he drug it all.
Oh,
over.
God.
Then they put it in their garage and I had to go steal it again.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Those are more
Those are more
shenanigans.
shenanigans, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But I forgave him.
Okay. Why does it feel so good to do that? Have comebacks or, you feel vindicated. There's always, I think there's always that eye for an eye thing. That's, that Scripture talks about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And I think the whole idea of, and this often comes up, but I think the whole idea of the eye for an eye thing in Scripture is that's a human nature thing. We want to do that. We want to get back at people. But in the law of God's people, the eye for an eye thing is there to say, don't let it get out of hand and out of control. If your neighbor injures you so that he injures your eye, and if you feel like you need to get back at him, you can get revenge, but not more than the eye. Okay? So if he takes your eye, you can get his eye, but you can't get his arm also. Okay? So and I think it's a real good, just, you get what I'm saying? So if your so put it in a different context. If your neighbor steals $500 from you, you don't get to turn around and sue him for $10 million. There's a limit. However much he wronged you, that's the limit to which you get revenge. Because otherwise it gets out of hand. And we see that all the time in news and courts and, that kind of stuff. So I think the law of God in saying an eye for an eye is not a bad thing. Yeah, if you feel like you need to get revenge, but put a limit on it. Joanne?
Well, what I usually tell people when they're angry, you need to forgive them, but it doesn't mean you need to forget what they did. But you need to forgive them so that you don't hold that revenge in, because if you hold it inside of you, you're not hurting them, you're hurting yourself.
Well, and that's true, although in the terms of the process, forgiveness often comes down the line, because people aren't ready to forgive right away. Okay? I mean, if somebody punches me on the arm, that sting of that punch isn't going to go away right away. Definitely the physical sting. So the time to forgive a person might not be immediately then either. Okay? So I think in the process of things, it might be good to say, step number one is to say, if you think you need revenge, then you get revenge within a limit. Okay? If somebody punches you on the arm and you think you need to punch him back, you only get to punch him on the arm once, because that's all he did to you. Okay? Step number two is, after you've simmered down, let's talk about forgiveness. Okay? Because oftentimes forgiveness, you can only talk about forgiveness after you've simmered down and can think logically, because, before then, it's all your emotional mind and all of your things steaming up, and you don't, forgiveness is actually a rational thing to do. When you're irrational, you can't do it. So after you simmer down, you take forgiveness. And then step number three is, now we can talk about forgetting and saying, what are we going to do about the whole deal? And all of those, and those last two can be very complex as well, right? They can be very complex as well. So you can have somebody, for instance, who, maybe you're driving home and somebody runs into you, runs their car into your car, has a car accident, and you lose the lower part of your leg in a car accident. Okay? So it might take you quite a while to learn how to forgive that person. Okay? there's a certain respect in which you'll never forget that you had that accident because there'll be a constant reminder there for the rest of your life. Namely, that you no longer have that part of your leg. So it may be difficult to say to that person, forget about it. Okay? So it can be a very complex kind of thing. But it does feel good to do that because it's human nature to try and get revenge. But we don't want to, but we do want to talk about forgiveness and how that should work. So let's talk about, let's see what we can find out about forgiving. And we should have a video. And the video is somewhere. It's on my screen, but it's not on yours. And in a moment, it will be on yours. There it is. Okay, here we go.
I love vacations. In fact, this past summer, my family who's from Florida went on a huge road trip. And we stopped in Ohio at this water park that had some really amazing looking water slides. My kids were so pumped. And so I look up at my 9-year-old son, Nathan, and he goes down the water slide and he comes up out of the water. And it's just pure bliss and excitement and happiness. And I look up thinking I'm going to see the same thing from Brady, but rather I see him turn around, put his head down, dejected, and walk down the stairs. And I said, Brady, what's up? What happened? And he said, you have to be 48 inches to ride the water slide. My son Brady is literally 47 plus inches at this time. He's from Florida. He knows how to swim. And so I said, Brady, this isn't right. Why don't you go to that slide over there? Same rules. Surely that lifeguard's not going to be as strict as the last one. And so he does. And the same thing happens. And at this point, I huddle my boys together and I say, okay, kids, here's what we're going to do. We're getting that Brady, that son of mine, on that water slide if it's the last thing we have to do. And here's what we're going to do. Brady, I want you to go up. I want you to stand tall this time. I want you to kind of stand on your tippy toes, right? And puff your chest up and look up a little bit because you got to be confident when you're in these things. And so sure enough, the plan works to perfection. I taught my kids how to lie. And Brady goes down the water slide. Once you go down it once, you go down it every time. Some of you might be judging me right now, thinking, how could you let your son get on that slide? Why would you ever teach your kids how to lie? But I bet in the room right now, I'm talking to a husband and wife duo, that you probably went to a restaurant and ordered one drink, and yet both of you have drunk from it. I bet there's someone in the room that might have even snuck some candy or a snack into the movie theater. And possibly even as a kid, you were sneaking into places that you know you shouldn't have been in. All of us have relaxed God's commands. All of us have shaded his truth for our favor. In fact, every single one of us has failed. And as we're talking this week a lot about sin and forgiveness, I bet that there's many of you right now that can think back to something that you said, something that you thought, something that you've done that even still today you are utterly ashamed of. So as we enter into days 13 through 19 of the Red Letter Challenge, we're going to be introduced to the second principle that Jesus calls, commands, and asks his followers to put into practice. And it's a huge one. It's a foundational one. It's this theme of forgiveness. Jesus talks a lot about forgiveness. He talks about how to receive God's forgiveness, and he talks about how we as his followers are to give away his forgiveness to others. But what's crazy is when I've asked people, which one do you struggle with more? Do you struggle more with receiving God's forgiveness for yourself or forgiving other people? More than 90% of people struggle more with receiving God's forgiveness for themselves. And the truth in that is this: you cannot be a really forgiving person unless you have been forgiven by God. And after all that Jesus has done for us, we as his followers, we know what he's saved us from. We know what he's forgiven us from. And so we want to be the greatest forgivers that we can be, to show people what the forgiveness of Jesus looks like in their life. Every time I fly, I'm always a little bit concerned when the flight attendant goes through the list of safety precautions. Like, I realize there's a risk when I fly. Just like I know there's a risk every time I get in my car, but I don't remind myself of that every time. And so they'll go through their spiel, and they'll have you take out the emergency card in your front seat and talk about all the flotation devices and everything like that. And I'll watch them with the people in the emergency exit rows, make sure they're okay. One of the things I've noticed as a parent is they'll walk down the aisles and they'll stop if you're traveling with a child and they'll say, hey, in the case of loss in cabin pressure, make sure you put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then put it on your child. And that always felt weird to me, especially in our culture where we bow down at the altar of our kids and we'll do anything to serve our kids and whatever they need. And so it feels weird when the flight attendant says, to me as the adult, you've got to take care of yourself first before you can take care of your kid. Turns out there's good reason for it. When you're flying at such a high altitude and something bad happens, you can actually lose your consciousness in less than 1 minute. And symptoms start coming like nausea and vomiting and blurriness and tunnel vision. And this disease called hypoxia, which is a deficiency in the amount of oxygen your brain has, comes in, and your capacity to do simple things deteriorates. And so you have to put it on yourself first in that first minute. It's so important so you can not only save yourself, but save your child. I think forgiveness is very similar. Many of us are walking around, and yet we're walking around with unforgiveness, and the devil wants to keep that on you. But you really won't be a forgiving person until you first have received what God has given to you. And until you put that mask on, that mask of forgiveness that God has given to you, then you can give it away to others. The enemy's going to want to come, and he's going to want to keep you in a state of unforgiveness as long as he possibly can. He's going to want you to have shame and guilt and baggage and want you to stay in that forever. But you don't have to any longer. God declares to you today that you can break free. He's done everything you need to break free. Jesus Christ has already paid the price for your sins, and there is no sin that is too big or too extreme that God did not already die for. It is done. And God invites you to break free and receive his forgiveness today. Because once you've broken free, you can help others break free. Once you've been forgiven, you can give forgiveness to others. And once you've been rescued, you can join God in his mission to rescue others.
Okay. So there we have it. That's the thing for today. I have not thought about forgiveness in terms of what he said before. Our forgiveness then, what we receive then enables us to forgive others, just like, when we receive the oxygen mask, that enables us to help our children or whoever is sitting next to us who might need help in an airplane. All right, so define forgiveness. What do you think? What would you like to say? Just give us a simple definition of forgiveness. You don't think there is a simple definition? Okay. Letting bygones be bygones? Yeah, could be. I have a pretty good definition of unforgiveness, which is, unforgiveness is when you drink poison hoping the other person will die. Yeah, that's what unforgiveness is. It's when I drink poison hoping the other guy is going to die. Yeah, because unforgiveness, all that does is poison me and kills something in me, and it doesn't harm him at all. In fact, that guy might go for the rest of his life not even being aware that I don't forgive him. Yeah, Bob.
I thought of a simple definition.
Okay.
Slate wiped clean.
Slate wiped clean. Okay, good. Okay, so let's ask this question. How is forgiveness different from excusing what people have done or just avoiding what people have done? How is it's not on there. How is forgiveness different from either excusing or avoiding what people have done?
Forgive someone, you should, maybe not always, but usually you forgive them to their face. But not always. To me, it's more personal, forgiveness is, other than the other two words.
Okay. Yeah, otherwise it's rehashing the same old thing. I'm going to go back to Bob's simple definition of a slate wiped clean. Okay, as I like that for this answer. When you forgive somebody, you actually have to do something. Okay. Remember when I don't know about. Yeah, we're almost all the same age where we had to clean blackboards. Or you had to wipe blackboards and do that kind of stuff, and and bang the erasers. That's a pretty, I mean, not strenuous like football, but that takes some action. Okay, to wash a blackboard clean takes some action. Dennis, you're probably a pro at it. Is that what you're
Well, I
saying?
used to have to write on them.
Yeah, I had to write on them.
I will not.
But to wash the blackboards and wipe them down takes some elbow grease, okay? To excuse what people have done doesn't take any emotional elbow grease. Yeah, and just avoid them is just turning your back on them and walking away, okay? So I like Bob's definition for that respect. Forgiveness takes some emotional elbow grease to do that. And so if you just say, oh, it's okay, and then walk away, it doesn't take any emotional elbow grease to do that. You don't have to actually do anything. But to forgive, you actually have to do something. Just like to forgive us as we have been forgiven, Jesus had to actually do something and not just say, oh, it'll be okay. He actually had to do what? Die on the cross. Okay. Why might you choose not to forgive someone? What are some reasons people decide they're not going to forgive somebody? It's just going to happen again, okay? Because, why? Because the person who hurt them is just going to continue to hurt them? Okay, or is it because the person who got hurt is just a person who gets hurt all the time? Yeah, it could be either one, Oh. Yeah. Okay, why else might a person choose not to forgive someone? The hurt was too bad, too deep, too hard. Okay. Why else might they choose not to forgive someone? Vengeance. Yeah, I want to, I like being mad. Yeah, so I can be a martyr, or poor me. Right? Okay. All kinds of reasons. So who is your unforgiveness hurting? You or the person who hurt you?
Yourself.
Yeah, that's what I said before. It's like drinking poison hoping the other person will die. Somebody may, that guy who caused the auto accident that causes a person to lose their leg, that guy might go on the rest of his life and not even be aware that you still haven't forgiven him. Well, so what does he care? I mean, maybe he's paid his fine or served his time or whatever, and he goes on, and you're not forgiving him. Well, big fat hairy deal. It's only hurting you, Joanne.
I had a really hard time forgiving my ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a long time and a lot of therapy before I could really accomplish that.
Yeah.
But once I did, it was great. I mean, I could forgive everybody. I had a really hard time with that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm the one that suffered, but eventually
Mm-hmm.
it happened.
Yeah.
Not without help.
Yeah. Now, if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to, but how was he during that time? Did
He was fine.
Yeah, he was fine.
And that's one of the things
Yeah.
that she finally said. Do you think he's worrying about what you're thinking up here? And I go, no. And she goes, then why are you worrying about him?
Yeah.
Until you hear things in a
Yeah.
real simple form, sometimes it just doesn't,
Yeah.
you don't get it.
Sometimes it has to be verbalized before you can accept it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was,
Mhm.
that was one of my hardest times,
Mm-hmm.
getting through that, because there was still just this little bit that I couldn't get past. And
Mm-hmm.
that was when I did keep praying about, because I just would not give up
Mm-hmm.
that one, took a while,
Mm-hmm, yeah.
because I was in a lot of pain. I felt they can hurt our kids and da-da-da-da, and it just was, it was rough. I had a hard time forgiving him completely.
Mm-hmm,
So I wanted to share that with you guys, because it was hard.
mm-hmm. Yep. Here's an interesting question. Has anybody ever wronged you more than you have wronged God? Probably not. You just don't understand. Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, giving forgiveness, doesn't the other person have to ask for it before you can give it?
No.
That goes both ways.
What if they're dead?
Pardon me?
What if they're dead?
Oh, jeez. I guess you don't offer it then.
What if the guy who ran into me and causes the loss of my leg is himself killed in that auto accident? And then I'm mad at him, but, you know, how can he ask for my forgiveness if he's dead?
How can you do it if he's dead? Well, I guess you can give it, but he's not gonna receive it.
Well, that's not my problem. If he's not there to receive it, it's not my problem. My problem is whether I'm forgiving him or not.
So all you're doing is relieving your own pressure, your own,
Well, in that sense, yes.
so.
In that sense,
As long
yes.
as you don't feel bitter, you say, well, okay, I can do it.
Right, because I'm not responsible, and in the same, you know, in the same case with Joanne. Joanne was not responsible for the way her ex-husband was behaving. Whether he received her forgiveness or not, she's not responsible for that. What she is responsible for is whether she forgives him or not, right? Yep. And how he responds to that, that's up to him. If he doesn't want it, you know, then that's his problem. And if the guy who runs into me and, you know, cuts off my leg and dies, if he's not there to receive it, that's not my problem. My problem is, do I forgive him or not? That's the only issue. That's the only issue with regard to forgiveness if there's somebody who has hurt me. That's the only issue. Whether he's there or not, whether he will receive it or not, whether he'll flip me off or whether he'll embrace it, that's not the issue. The issue is, do I forgive him or not?
A lot of people out there who could care less.
And there's a lot of people out there who could care less.
They hurt you and they look at you, yeah, I'm like that.
Sometimes they could care less. Sometimes they don't realize that they hurt you. Sometimes if you point out to them that you hurt me, they'll like, you know, there are people who would say, oh, I never realized, and I'm so sorry, and they will apologize, you know, and they will apologize once it's been pointed out to them that what they've done actually has been a hurt. But there are some people who, you know, and then there are others who are just sociopathic and they don't care. But, you know, but the point of forgiveness is, it is about you and what you have done, how you have approached that, and not about how they've received it, or even if they're still around to receive it. We have that, and Dan, you know, we've got that problem. That's an issue oftentimes with, you know, how do we help people in their emotional and spiritual healing who, you know, they're victims of child abuse from years ago when they were kids, and their abuser is dead now. Okay? Like some of these people who are accusing Catholic priests. You know, how do you forgive the priest who abused you if he's dead? Well, you just, you know, you just do. You can't confront him, but you can forgive him. You know, because it's about you releasing that pain from the past. So that's when it's really hard to do, when there's that knowledge that that person isn't even around for you. Because people seem to think that forgiveness needs to involve confrontation, and it doesn't. It just needs to involve release. Does that help?
Stop the tumor that's growing inside.
That's a good way to say it, too. Forgiveness will stop the tumor that's growing inside you. Yeah,
The more you dwell on it, the more it grows.
yeah. Yeah. But that was a good question, though. That was good. All right, let's ask this. Is the way God forgives us different from the way we forgive others? Yes? How?
I think God forgives us with an agape forgiveness.
Okay, what does that mean? An agape forgiveness.
Strong as agape love. Perfect. No grudge.
Mm-hmm. No grudges, perfect, agape love. Okay.
It says, "Oh, forgive and remember no more."
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear you, Jan.
Unconditional forgiveness. Yeah, unconditional forgiveness. And in fact, I cannot imagine this happening for any of us. But in fact, what God does is He says, basically, in essence, He says, I forgive every sin that you've ever committed. And as the sign of my promise, here's my son. Now, can you imagine doing that to someone who's hurt you? I forgive everything you've done to me, and as a sign of that, you can have my son here. So yeah, that's what agape love is all about. Yeah. Is it harder to forgive yourself or to forgive others? For you, it's harder to forgive others? Oh, you think it's easier to forgive somebody else than you? Okay. Are you a kind of person who just always is woulda, coulda, shoulda, and regretting things all the time? Yeah. If only. The if onlys.
Her favorite line
Be careful.
Just gonna say,
One of her favorite lines is
is, realize that her.
Just forgive them, just forgive them.
Just, get that.
yeah. I'll forget it. Okay.
we wanna know now.
Her favorite line is how much Dan loves her.
She always says, can't believe I did that.
Yeah. Well, you can't, to say, I can't believe to do something and then a moment later say, I can't believe I did that is one thing. To say, I can't believe I did that thing 20 years ago and still be saying it after 20 years. That's another thing entirely. Okay. I mentioned in the sermon this morning, I was at I was at this workshop this week that was mostly for school counselors, and the guy who was a presenter was the exec of Ohio Guidestone, which is a counseling service for the whole state, and it does counseling and drug abuse prevention and all kinds of stuff. And he said, people who believe in redemptive salvation have an easier time with that issue than people who don't, because people who don't believe that God has forgiven them all their sins tend to dwell on the sins of the past. They just dwell on the sins of the past. They're constantly going back and saying, I regret that I did that, I regret that I did that, I regret that I did that, I regret that I did that. But we who believe it, and he didn't say this because he said, I'm a man of science and not a man of faith, although he did say his dad was a Pentecostal preacher, so there was something in his background, But we who believe in what Jesus has done for us, we know that Jesus has erased the sins of the past, and there's no reason for us to go back and look for them because God doesn't see them. So, they're like that leg that is no longer there, but God doesn't hold that against us. All right, let's do this because we're getting close to the end of time. Rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on how you are at receiving and giving away forgiveness. 1 is very poor, 10 is excellent. Okay, how are you at receiving forgiveness? Very poor or excellent? When somebody forgives you, how do you do in receiving that forgiveness?
Much better than I was when I was young.
Much better than you were when you were young?
Yeah, when I was young, I had a hard time accepting.
Okay.
But that word sorry just goes a long way. You know that?
It does. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But that goes a long way.
How are you in terms of giving away forgiveness? Better than you used to be. Yeah. Sometimes it's like getting blood out of a turnip to get forgiveness from some people, but, you know, and then when you find somebody like that, you know, oftentimes it's their issue, and no matter many times you apologize, it's not going to happen. It's their issue. So.
Some things are easier to do than others.
Yeah, and sometimes, and that's why forgiveness is a complex thing, because sometimes it's easier to forgive, sometimes it takes longer, you know. If you feel comfortable doing so, share that number with the group. Yeah. My number is, you know, anywhere between 1 and 10, depending on, you know, depending on who we're talking about. I'm going to tell you that honestly. I've got some people that I'm not real comfortable with forgiving, and some people that I'm forgiving, like, you know, very comfortable with forgiving pretty quickly. So.
So it depends on what was done to you, that you're able to give forgiveness.
Yeah, sort of. Sort of. There's yeah, and, you know, what was done, you know, and the thing that was done to me that causes me to withhold, if it was done to you, you'd say, why is that such a big deal? Okay? You know, because everybody's different, but you get that. Okay? Anything else before we go to the closing thought and prayer here? Anything else? Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, it is unconditional. No, it doesn't come with a condition. It's because the idea of unconditional is he'll love you whether you believe in him or not. Okay, he'll you know he loves people whether they believe in him or not. But so it's like, I'm trying to say how to say this. But faith is like, it's like the bucket that you're going to put that love in. Okay? God will love you if you believe in him or not, but if you don't have a bucket to put the love in, then you'll never receive it. You'll never have it. That's what the faith is. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. No, that's not really a condition because he loves you, but I mean, God loves, you know, God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And whether you believe in him or not is not an issue with God's love. It's an issue of whether you have the thing necessary to keep that, you know, to receive that love. And people don't. Yeah. Well, and a lot of that is, yeah, when God passes out the buckets, do you receive it or do you refuse it? And some of it is people, you know, they are not even in a place where they've received that bucket of faith yet. But, you know, it's like that. And that's a really quick and probably bad analogy, but I mean, if it helps for the moment, you know.
No, it's because like I said,